what Trump has done, I think, of a series of sort of Bolshevik Leninist ideas about what he thinks should happen as a whim, as a single leader, has set fire to everybody's pension plans, everybody's value, everybody's long-term futures. And I think the problem with Trump is that he's got a kind of an idea in his head that he's able to force through without any congressional support, just on a whim.
The world has changed. That's what certainly what Keir Starmer says. Globalization is over, and we're now in a new era. That's in relation to the fallout of Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. The market response to those tariffs is being felt in real time. The Nikkei closed down more than 7% today, the Hang Seng down 12%. But it's true to say that globalisation, is it true rather to say that globalisation is over, or does international trade hold the key to surviving the storm? This was Donald Trump's message for Europe last night.
Europe's treated us very badly. We put a big tariff on Europe. They are coming to the table. They want to talk. But there's no talk unless they pay us a lot of money on a yearly basis. Number one for present, but also for past, because they've taken a lot of our wealth away, and we're not going to allow it to happen.
That was Donald Trump speaking overnight, and some people have suggested that that relates in some way to a similar deal with Ukraine. You know, the idea that you should try and recoup your losses from a country and you should try and ensure that Europe pays back what Donald Trump thinks Europe owes. Let's get the thoughts of Peter Frankopan, who's Professor of Global History at Oxford University. Good morning.
Morning.
When we talk about globalisation, just as a starting point, what do we mean in this context?
Well, normally we mean global trade systems. I mean, globalization, I suppose you could think of in terms of the international rules-based order, the United Nations, et cetera, et cetera. In this particular case, what we're talking about is the ability of goods to move around the world freely and as efficiently as possible. And I think that is what Donald Trump has set fire to. But for two reasons. First, because he keeps talking about America having to pay the price for other people's success. I mean, per capita GDP in the United States is about 10 times what it is in China. It's about 3 times what it is in the UK. You know, the US, when Trump took over, had the biggest and most powerful and best placed economy in the world. And what Trump has done, I think, of a series of sort of Bolshevik Leninist ideas about what he thinks should happen as a whim, as a single leader, has set fire to everybody's pension plans, everybody's value, everybody's long-term futures. And I think the problem with Trump is that he's got a kind of an idea in his head that he's able to force through without any congressional support, just on a whim. But also it's sort of predicated on the idea that he thinks that if he announces these things, it'll fix things. And I wouldn't say that's a big gamble, because you don't need to ask me. Look at the trillions of dollars that have been taken off the table and been collapsed since Thursday morning. And those double-digit falls you're talking about this morning, and the FTSE down 6% in the first, or 5% in the first half hour, it tells you that people think that the world is going to get tougher, harder, more expensive, less efficient. And those things work well if you're in Moscow in 1917, but not if you're leader of the free world.
And how should we see this from the UK perspective? The Prime Minister is going to stand up today and talk about the end of globalisation. But at the same time, we know his government is still trying to forge a trade deal with Australia. There is still talk of a trade deal or some kind of partnership with the States, however likely or unlikely that is. What is he actually... Do you think Keir Starmer actually sort of has a plan here, a long-term plan?
Well, we're on fire. I mean, there's no question about that. And the question about whether our house is burning a little bit less badly than our allies and friends around the world, whether they're in Europe or Australia, it looks to me completely incidental at the moment. They're kind of, talking about whether the theory of globalization is over. What's required now is immediate and urgent action to stem the flows. I mean, for what it's worth, you'd think that this would be the moment where we improve our trade networks with our closest trading partners and geographical allies as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, as I've been saying for the last 10 years, the problem about Brexit was as much about the timing of deciding that this was a good moment for us to leave Europe. Now that's done, the two things that we need to do, of course, are to try to make ourselves stand within a global trading system where we can make the damage as less bad as possible. So, I think in the short term, the fact there's going to be a lot of inventory around the world that's not going to ship to the United States might mean there's deflation for those of us who stand outside. But I think Starmer's biggest challenge now is to talk about Britain and other countries like us, particularly democratic states. But, you know, there are lots of others who sing from the same page as us to try to think about what does the world order now look like and what is Britain's place in that. You know, there are not many countries in the world that are members of the UN Security Council, not many members of G7 and G20, not many members who have the convening power that we have here in the UK. And I think it's about leadership, and some of the decisions that are going to be taken in number 10 over the next few hours and days are absolutely critical, because, you know, what Trump has done is set fire to something that none of us thought was even possible, and the fact that there's been no pushback over the weekend. You know, I think that the scale of what's happening is very hard to overstate.
I mean, you mentioned some of those huge, big organisations, NATO, the United Nations, etc. Do they still count for very much anymore if Donald Trump is suggesting that they don't matter to America?
Well, I suppose it's a bit like being in the, you know, on the Serengeti or on the jungle at dusk. You know, when things get tough, you probably don't want to be the animal that separates from the rest of the pack. So, you know, for sure, one of the odd things that Trump has done, rather than talking about making America great again, is going to push new alliances between Europe and, I think, places like China, where, as a matter of necessity rather than of choice, there's going to have to be some realignment about how do we negotiate with people around the world who don't make it harder for us to trade and to deal. And, you know, those scales of losses over the last 3 days, there's no guarantee they're not going to continue. And one of the problems I think we have with Trump is that if he wakes up tomorrow and decides that he'll scrap tariffs for a few more months or a couple of years. I mean, he's announced 22 tariffs since he became president, has only followed through on 4. It means that we're dealing with the whim of a single individual, and it's very hard to plan around that. So normal, mature, grown-up states, you know, particularly democracies, particularly our partners in Europe, will be trying to think, how do we create a system, how do we benefit from a system where there's stability that's baked in and where people behave in a way that you can anticipate and they follow through. And, you know, for all sorts of reasons, this new administration under Trump is better prepared than the last one to have ideologues who are shaping policy, people like Peter Navarro.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things are extremely dangerous, where single individuals are shaping massive global policy. So Starmer's got to work out how to protect us here in the UK from some of the worst effects. I don't think there's any particular point whatsoever in trying to negotiate with the US. I mean, our tariff level in the UK, before we get too pleased about the fact we're punished less than Europe, it's the same level as those penguins in Herban and McDonald Island, but also the same level that the Taliban are paying. So, you know, we're all in it together. So it's how can we construct something where stability comes to first and foremost, because this might all get worse rather than just be a 3-day spin.
Just finally, we spoke to Sir Howard Davis earlier on the programme, and he said that we are heading, he thinks, towards a global recession because of what we're seeing in the markets at the moment and the result of these tariffs. You have a much better ability to look at this in a zoomed out, longer term view. So how does a country like the UK come out of potentially a recession well?
No one comes out of recession well. I mean, recessions can spark hardline rises of hard left and hard right. I mean, in the 1930s, the end of the Weimar Republic and the recession in Germany produced Adolf Hitler. So coming out of recession, there's no soft landing. You know, and I think the recession is a word that means something to economists. I think it's as Bill Ackman has said overnight, who's one of the key Trump supporters, by the way, it's economic nuclear winter. That's the problem. And, you know, when companies lose value, they don't invest for the future. They lay people off. Efficiencies start to plummet. What Trump does by putting tariffs and protect businesses, it means that it's not the best product or the cheapest one. It's one that suits American national interests, whatever those might be. I mean, everybody understands in things like defense and defense technologies, there's a reason for that, but not perhaps when it comes to cars or to making crisps or different kinds of food, then perhaps you're not protecting the market, which is an odd thing for the leader of the free world to be doing. But I think there's no way out that happens quickly. And those big things that Howard Davis has been comparing it to of 2008, that was bankers who created financial products that were completely toxic and took the world lending to people who couldn't pay their loans back and selling those loans on and on and on again and again.
Yeah.
The pandemic, there was a reason why that happened. The Wall Street crash, there was a reason that happened. What this has come out of absolutely nowhere, purely on the decision making of a single man who spent all of Friday playing golf, by the way. And to give a sense of what Trump has done, as well as crashing the markets, on Thursday he took a meeting with a right-wing activist who told him that 5 people in the national security world, she thought she didn't like the way they looked at her, and their loyalty was suspect. So on Thursday, Trump sacked the head of US Cyber Command, the head of the US National Security Council, and 3 senior veterans of national security world. That's the White House we're dealing with. So Starmer, it's not a question of how do you plan for how to make things less bad. It's making sure that things don't get much, much worse, which they might do.
Peter Frankopan, Professor of Global History at Oxford University, many thanks for your time.